Hi, everyone. Welcome to Backstage with Speaking Your Brand. I'm Carol Cox, founder and CEO of Speaking Your Brand, and we are talking today about closing the gender speaking gap. And I promised in my tease for today's show that I'm going to share a story from a few years ago where I was at an event hosted by a very prominent women's organization. And I was really mad about who they selected to be on stage. That's a little tease for you to stay tuned because it really has to do with this idea of the gender speaking gap. But I'm really excited to have here with me today on the LinkedIn Live show, Kristin Oakley, who's a professional speaker and MC. And we got to know each other. She attended our summit that we did a little over a year ago. And I remember in the comments that she came in as a Speaking Your Brand newbie, and she said that she's leaving a fan for life. And I was like, oh, that just like touched me so much. And so then Kristin and I worked together in a VIP day over the summer to help her create her signature talk around this idea of the gender speaking gap. Kristin, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Carol. I'm so honored and excited to be here with you.
Yes, likewise. And hi, Diane. Thanks for tuning in. And if you are listening live, let us know in the comments, say hi. And if you're watching the replay, let us know that as well. And if you have questions for Kristin or for myself along the way, definitely post them in the comments because we want to hear from you. Kristin, tell us a little bit more about your background and especially your background as a professional speaker. What does that mean and what does that look like?
Absolutely. Well, I've had a very unique career path, I would say, in that I have been blessed to work across multiple industries over the past 20 years since I've been in the workforce. But the one common thread in all the jobs I've ever had, it's involved public speaking. And what's so fascinating is a lot of the industries I found myself in were not ones that I had any prior experience in or knowledge of. But the door opened for me to work in those industries because of my public speaking skills. And so it's really fascinating because that has been the common thread that has just allowed me to expand myself and grow myself personally and professionally. And it's a skill that has served me so well. If you had told me over 20 years ago that I would have been a professional speaker, I would not have believed you because I was really shy and I was nervous and I was drawn and I enjoyed watching speakers, but particularly women. They inspired me. And there was a little bit of this, oh, I wish I could do that. But never in a million years did I dream that I would end up doing that very thing. So it's been a wild ride. I'm so grateful for it. And it's a skill that I'm very passionate about and especially passionate empowering other women because I've seen the doors that it's opened for me.
And Kristin, when you were young, elementary school, middle school, high school, did you like to perform in any way?
I did actually. So that was the interesting thing. Back when I was younger, if I was a character and I was playing someone else, I felt free to do that. And I'll remember the first time was I was 8 years old. I was in third grade, and the teacher announced that there was going to be a class musical, and it was Hansel and Gretel. And I just knew with every fiber in my being that I wanted to be Gretel. And I auditioned and I got the part, and that was my first time on stage. And so I did some acting here or there throughout my childhood and then kind of just fell away from it. But then later on, I actually received an acting scholarship in New York City. But while I was there and doing that training, I had an important shift. And I realized that rather than playing a character, I enjoyed being in front of audiences and I enjoyed that performance element. But I actually was much more comfortable being myself and talking about things that I was passionate about that I knew could make a tangible, positive difference in people's lives versus playing a character. Whereas I was surrounded by a lot of actors who felt the complete opposite. They wanted to play a character, they didn't feel as comfortable being themselves. And so once that shift happened, that's when I realized, oh, okay, I think this is the career path and this is the direction that I need to head.
That is such an interesting insight that you had there, Kristin. And I know I can imagine for a lot of actors, they do prefer to play someone else, but that you realized it was actually the opposite. And for those of you who are either watching us live or in the replay, let us know in the comments if you like to perform when you were young, whether it was acting, dancing, singing, playing a musical instrument or recitals. Let us know because I think there is definitely a common thread among those of us who enjoy speaking and like to do speaking that we did have this performing aspect of ourselves when we were younger.
Yeah.
And so, Kristin, so you've been on lots of stages over the years, lots of events, conferences, seminars that you have spoken at, that you've attended. So tell us what this gender speaking gap is and when did this first kind of come to your awareness? Were you sitting at an event one day and you thought, wow, there's something going on here?
So, funnily enough, I was late to the party on this whole gender speaking gap thing because I was so fortunate that even though I was predominantly working in male-dominated industries. Looking back, I realize now how good I had it. And what I mean by that is each team I was a part of, the companies I worked for actually really esteemed women. And in those environments, it was actually normal, more normal to have a female presenter. So I didn't start to pick up on this until I was actually working in the financial services industry. And I was a full-time presenter for the nation's largest independent investment advisory firm at the time. And I would travel and go to these work sites and these different corporations and be presenting content. And I was just greeted with this, oh gosh, we're so excited to have a woman here today. And so that began to just kind of spark some curiosity of, oh, this is really not the norm. And so I was starting to pay attention to that. But what really opened my eyes was about a year ago, I was asked to give a virtual keynote. And Carol, I wish I could remember what I Google searched to stumble upon what I found. I was asked to speak on my area of expertise. So I was putting together a presentation about, and it was a female audience about speaking. And I came across the Gender Diversity and Inclusion Report that was put out by Bizzabo, which is one of the world's largest event software companies. And the data that I found was from 2019. So it was obviously, pandemic. But it was so fascinating because there, clear as day in the data, it illustrated that there was a gender speaking gap and that it had been existing for a long time. So in this report, they actually went through and they researched from 2013 through the end of 2019, over 60,000 event speakers worldwide. Worldwide.
Wow.
And they found that women were actually really underrepresented at professional gatherings and events. And I was looking at this, and that's when it hit me, and the pieces kind of started coming into place that I wouldn't say sheltered, but I had been in an environment that supported women and encouraged women's voices. So I just wasn't aware of just what those stats were outside of my realm of where I had been working. And that just really opened my eyes because it broke it down by country, it broke it down by industry, it broke it down by type of events. And that's when you really start to see, oh my gosh, there is a gender speaking gap. And then I kind of went down this rabbit hole and started to do as much research as I possibly could because it just really fascinated me. And that's when I learned that there had been trending hashtags of no more manels, meaning, we need panels that have women on them and not just men. And it was almost like I felt, part of me was like, do I want to stick my finger in this hornet's nest? Because all the articles and everything I was finding, you could just tell there was a lot of anger and a lot of frustration about the lack of women's voices and representation. But it lit this fire in me of, I need to learn more and I need to figure this out. And I'll pause with that. But that was kind of what really opened my eyes just a year ago to what had been going on for many years, but I just wasn't as aware of it.
Well, first, I'm grateful for that organization for having analyzed 60,000 events and their speakers and panelists to come up with this data set to begin with. That's extraordinary. And one of my favorite resources is called Gender Avenger. They have a great Twitter account and website where they will look at the lineups of conferences, panels, and so on across all industries, whether it's a panel about science and COVID, if it's a finance, cryptocurrency, conferences about marketing, doesn't matter what the industry, what type of event, and they will call out the organization if they don't have a diverse mix of speakers and panelists, whether women, diversity of color, all of that. Because in this day and age, and for any conference or event to say, oh, we just couldn't find, XYZ to fit, or we couldn't find an expert who was a woman or a Black woman or a person of color, is honestly just being lazy nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because what I found is I felt like there was two sides to this conversation. And of course, you've been following this even longer than I have, but it seemed like there was that camp that was almost pointing fingers, passing blame at event organizers and saying, they need to do a better job. And I understand. I was like, okay, there are systemic things that probably definitely need to change. And then you had the camp that was kind of whining and complaining, we just can't find enough female speakers. And I'm like, well, that can't be totally right either because we exist and I know we do. And so my mind began churning of, okay, I don't want to join the complaint train, right? Like obviously there's an issue, there's a gap. And my mind always goes to, if there's a problem, okay, well, what can I do to help be part of the solution?
Mhm.
And what I found that there wasn't really a lot of conversation around that I could find yet were people really talking about, okay, well, how do we empower more women to own their expertise, to own their voice, and to step up into the skill set so that we can kind of merge these two worlds and
Mhm.
no longer will there be a gap. So that was kind of what really started motivating me is, okay, well, what can we do to be part of that solution?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Kristen. It reminds me that this was about 5 years ago now. I was reading or no, listening to a podcast that was hosted by HubSpot, which is
Mhm.
and they have their inbound marketing conference that they host every year. It's huge. I mean, like, I don't even know, thousands and thousands of attendees, hundreds of speakers, because they have multiple tracks going on at the same time. So lots and lots of speakers. And again, this was about 5 years ago. So I'm sure or hoping the numbers have changed. But the two hosts said that, they wanted to have like a 50-50 balance of male and female speakers, but they don't get enough submissions from women to
Mm,
speak at the event in order to hit those numbers. And so, yes, to your point, like, there are things that we
mhm,
have to do on both sides. And that's why, I appreciate the work that you do. And of course, what we do here at Speaking Your Brand is to
mhm.
help women put together those speaking proposals, find their best topics, put themselves out there, optimize their LinkedIn profiles so that they can be selected as speakers and put out their speaking submissions. So, Kristen, so this gender
Mhm,
speaking gap is this idea that when we go to events and conferences, we tend to see more men on stages than we
mhm,
tend to see women. And of course, like we talked
mhm.
about, there's myriad reasons for that. So I'll share a story, the
Yes.
one that I had teased. So this was back in November of 2016. So it was actually right after, a week or two after the November 2016 election, which of
Mhm,
course didn't go the way that many of us had hoped. And so actually Diane, who's our lead speaking coach, and I know she was here
mhm,
watching us, she and I went to this event together, and it was hosted by a very well-known, prominent women's organization. So this was our local chapter. It's a national organization. If I said the name, everyone would know who it was. It's enough of a hint.
mhm,
And so we had been members of this organization for the past year or two. And so we were excited. This was their annual event that they were hosting. So basically all women attendees there. And they were celebrating some women who had won some awards that they were giving away. So we get to this nice country club, for the luncheon, and get ready for the keynote speaker. And you'll never guess who the keynote speaker was. It was not a woman.
mm,
It was a man.
mhm,
And I was floored. Seriously, I can still remember to this day. Why would a prominent women's organization pay? And he was a known name, so I'm sure he
mhm,
charged a hefty fee, speaking
mhm,
fee. But why would a women's organization select a man as the keynote speaker when there were so many women they could have chosen instead? And I was
mhm,
like, wow, even if you're a woman, you're not necessarily conscious of making these choices either.
mhm, mhm.
So
Yes.
it just really, and so
You're
the
like, of
org
all places to expect where
right,
there would not right, and that yeah, that was
right.
probably a lot of the shock, right?
And then what his message was so out of touch with
Mm,
the audience being women professionals and entrepreneurs. It just was not a good fit all the way around. So for
mhm,
multiple reasons, Diane and I ended up not renewing our membership at that organization because it didn't feel like aligned with our
mhm,
values. And so
mhm,
this is why I enjoy having this conversation with you, Kristen, is to raise our awareness for
mhm.
the choices that we're making
Yep.
and who we're listening to, who we're selecting for
Mhm.
whatever the events happen to be.
Yep.
Okay, so then, Kristen, so we have a good idea of what the gender speaking gap, and it is about being conscious of when we are hosting our own events, making
Mhm.
sure that we're having a diversity of women speakers if it is all women, but obviously if it's a co-ed audience, making sure that we have a good balance,
Yes.
and then also making sure that as women we are submitting to speak, we are pitching for speaking
Mhm.
engagements, we are building those relationships with event organizers so that we can get selected as speakers. Hi, Radhika. So nice to see you here. She was one of our speakers at our April Bravo Beyond Live
Um,
Virtual Summit. Yeah, she's
good.
done a lot of speaking, mostly in corporate settings. All right. So, Kristen, let's talk about, you recently did, I believe, an in-person speaking engagement.
Oh, I did. Well, it was a hybrid, which was so fun because that's really becoming the new normal. So yes, but go ahead and I'll feel free to tell
Okay.
you more about
So
it.
yeah, I did my first in-person speaking engagement in September, the first since COVID had started. So had been well over a year and a half. And it was great to be back in person. It was also exhausting. Like I think I've forgotten how much energy it takes to be in person with a group of people. It's totally different than being on Zoom. And so I would just love to hear from you. Like, how did it feel to be back in person? What do you think the audience like felt about having this experience in person? And as a speaker, what were some things, did you do anything differently to prepare or differently regarding your delivery and content?
Oh my goodness, such great questions and so much to unpack here. So, what's interesting is the event that I recently did was done out of a studio, Valiant Productions. They are amazing. And when the pandemic hit, they really had to pivot and they took one of their warehouses and turned it into this amazing virtual stage that now allows groups to have hybrid events. So when we're saying hybrid events now, that means a mix of you have in-person attendees and you also have people tuning in virtually. This one was very unique because it was international and we only had about 12 people in the studio, but we had over 100 people tuning in worldwide. So here I am on a stage in Boise, Idaho, and I'm looking out and there's a giant Zoom wall. And I've got people tuning in from New Zealand, Australia, Italy, the UK, all across North America, the US and Canada. And so really, I mean, it's amazing what this new hybrid situation has looked like in that I think as we go back to a more normal, yes, we're going to see the continuation and hopefully the increase of in-person events. And I agree with you, Carol. I've thought a lot about the energy. That's a whole nother topic I'd love to dive into with you because I definitely felt that as well. But moving forward, companies are realizing what a cost savings it is to do this hybrid model because now they can reach people on a global scale tuning in, and there's not the cost of the hotel and the airfares and the putting people up and all that comes with it. And so what I am finding is that what event organizers are looking for are speakers who can not only engage the room and can not only engage on camera, because being on camera is a different skill set, but someone who can do both. That's where the future is really going. So I'll give you an example. Recently, I was working with a client who was making her first presentation, and it was a hybrid situation. And as I was asking her questions to help her prepare, she hadn't even thought, oh gosh, I need to pay attention to the virtual audience. I need to make sure I engage them. And so we threw in, and I gave her some creative ideas. I said, how can you turn your attention to that virtual screen at a couple different key points and get them to engage, get them to raise their hand, ask them a question. You're going to need to pause because there's a lag through Zoom. All these different things to really help virtual attendees feel like they're there in person. One of the fun little things, which I think is a great idea, I have them here at my desk, but we create what we call Zoom paddles. So we have these different emojis, right? Like you have the heart emoji, you have the laughing emoji, you have the, oh, that's a great new idea. And so all the attendees had these paddles. So as speakers were on the stage projecting out, they could see a whole wall of hearts or see a whole wall of laughing emojis. And we had so many attendees say, I felt like I was there. And that was the biggest compliment because that's the goal. You don't want people to feel like they're away on an island, in Zoom land. You want them to feel like they're immersed so that they too can have that transformative experience. So I think moving forward for professional speakers, it's really important to embrace this, not just wait for it to go back to the way that it was, because I think things have forever changed, but I think it's opening new doors of opportunity. And so just like we have to learn to master that skill set of standing on stage in front of a room with people in person, it's equally as important to understand on-camera work and how to up your energy, because we all know the camera sucks away at least 10% of our energy. It's not fair. It adds 10 pounds and it sucks 10% of energy away, right? But we've got to figure out how to deliver that transformative, engaging experience for attendees, whether they are in person or tuning in virtually.
Kristen, first, I love the Zoom paddles. Are those like somewhere, like, can people buy them or
Oh
did you
my
all
gosh.
make them?
No, so this was the event organizer created them. So she just took, I mean, they're the emojis from our phones, right? And we have a whole bunch of, I mean, they're just, it's a really fun idea. So yeah.
That is brilliant. And then you just mailed them to all of the attendees.
Exactly. And
Oh,
then for the ones who are overseas or whatever, they sent them the PDFs and they could print them out and make their own.
oh my gosh.
So
I am
really cost
totally going to
effective.
borrow that and
Yeah, go
recommend
for
that.
it.
I think she should have patented that if that was possible. I don't know,
Right.
but that was a great idea. And then, and to your point about the hybrid events, I agree that they're going to stay for because so
Mhm.
many conferences realize that a lot of the attendees are not going to fly either because of health concerns. You know, but a
Mhm.
lot of people, even with who are vaccinated, like I'm vaccinated, I'm still not eager to get on an airplane and fly, you know, across the
And
country.
travel's just changed. It's not,
Yes.
yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yes. Yeah, like, it's not like I'm
Mhm.
not jumping up and down. Like, if I
Right.
have, like, a really nice vacation to go on for 2 weeks, I will probably get on an airplane, but to go for 3 days to a conference,
I
you know.
used to fly 4 times a week, and looking back, I don't even know how I did it. There's no way. I'm grateful that those days are not here anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And then also, like, for so many women who have to take care of their children, either they're still schooling them at home, full time or part time, or they just have, you know, intermittent childcare. And this existed before the pandemic, but now I feel like so many more people will be able to access conferences and
Yes.
events that they weren't able to get to live before. So I'm
Mhm.
actually glad that the hybrids will continue. But to your point, Kristen, it's one thing to focus totally online, like we're doing now on video on Zoom, and totally different to do only in person. But to have to
Mhm.
do both at the same time, that is an entirely different skill set.
It is. It is. And one of the things that I love that the woman who put on this conference is an annual conference. She is a firm believer that movement can change your state of mind. So I was not only keynote speaking at this event, I was also emceeing the whole thing, and it was a 3-day virtual event. And so she had me lead 6 different line dances
Oh my
throughout
gosh.
the 3 days. And what was so fun, it was like this global Zoom dance party. And so I'm up on stage leading the wobble or whatever it might be. It was so fun. And I'm looking out and seeing women all over the world joining in and having these moments together. It was really, really powerful. And so anything that we can do like that to help really draw people in. I've also started to pay attention to, and I tried to do this before, but I think my awareness of it is a lot more heightened when I'm delivering a keynote, is how can I engage all the senses as much as possible? And doing things that not only unify the audience, but can also tap into different learning styles and how people absorb information. So one quick story I'll share if you'd
Yes,
like to hear.
please.
This was last May, so I was out at the same studio that I just mentioned, and this was for another global event, a 2-day event, and I delivered the final keynote on the first day. And as I was preparing the content, I felt led to include a song that I felt really kind of summed up the message of my talk. And so I shared a little bit of the story of the song, and then I allowed it to play, and I had the lyric video on the screen. And I asked the attendees that during the course of the song, they were to have a blank sheet of paper and they were to write out something that they were committed to doing using one of the phrases of the song. And then at the end, and I get chills thinking about it, everyone held up what they had promised to themselves to kind of anchor in what they had just learned and what they were going to do moving forward. I was not prepared for just the wealth of emotion. I mean, to see the tears and see these women holding up their signs in unison together. And we got some beautiful screenshots of, you know, all these Zoom squares. Here, I'm the only one in the studio on the stage, but I've got women tuning in from all over that are committing and making a promise to themselves. It was just a beautiful moment. And so doing things like that as speakers where we can just really involve multiple senses and engagement, I think is really helpful too.
Oh, Kristen, those are excellent ideas. And I love the senses and just getting the audience to interact more and really, I can
Mhm.
imagine they feel so much more part of the event rather than just
So true.
passively consuming the content.
Yeah, and we welcome the chat. You know, we had 2 monitors up front so I could see people chatting. And so again, you have to kind of pause for that lag time, but you know, blow up the chat. Tell me what you know, asking questions and asking for their feedback in real time is really powerful. So I would encourage speakers to don't be afraid of that, right? Because I think some people are like, oh, if I look at the chat, it's going to throw me off. No, just like we would do with a real audience and looking for that
Yes.
feedback, you build it in and you find strategic ways to do that throughout your material.
I love that. Oh my gosh. That's why I was taking notes of what you were recommending. These are such great ideas, Kristen.
Oh,
All
thank you.
right. So then any other lessons that you would like to share being a public speaker for the past 20 years, whether it was
Mhm.
back in the pre-pandemic days or more recently, anything that comes to mind that you think would be helpful for our audience?
Oh gosh, it's so hard to boil it down to one. Can I share two?
Oh, you can share. Yes. Yes, for
Okay, cool.
sure.
So I think the biggest thing that has helped mitigate nerves for me is focusing on the fact that it's not about me. As speakers, it's not about us, it's about the audience. And I think the more that we can focus on that and realize, okay, if you have a message to share, that message matters because it's not about you and somebody else needs to hear it. And I use that mantra, if you will, before I step on stage, just kind of this re-acknowledging of, okay, this is not about me, this is about the audience. It's about what they need and how this message can help change their lives. Now, all of a sudden, it takes the focus off myself. It takes the pressure off me. It mitigates the nerves. It actually gets me excited to deliver the message. And there I'm in service of the message. And my
Mhm.
job is to deliver it the best way that I can. So that shift alone, just taking the focus, because I think a lot of people get wrapped up in, oh, I'm so nervous to stand up there and people are going to be judging me and thinking about me. And it's like, it's not about you. It's not about us as speakers. It's about the audience and how we can serve them and how we can help bring positive transformation to their lives. So that's one thing that's been super helpful. And I wish I could remember who it is off the top of my head, but a well-known speaker said that in his early speaking days, he used to run on the stage and think to himself, here I am. But all that did was come across as cocky and unapproachable. And the day he had the shift of running on stage and looking out at the audience and saying, oh, there you are, and making it about them, that was the massive shift.
Mhm.
So I think that for sure has been a huge, huge help to me. I would say the other piece that has been really helpful, especially since we're talking about closing the gender speaking gap, is yes, as we've talked about, there's systemic things that can change, but going back to what can we as women do to be part of the solution to the problem, it really comes down to this concept, I believe, of giving ourselves permission.
Mhm.
Giving ourselves permission to be willing to become experts in our field, to own our expertise, to be willing to learn these skills because speaking is a learnable skill. No one it comes out of the womb born a speaker. Nobody comes out of the womb knowing how to be an on-camera presenter. Those are learned skills. And if you want to learn them, you absolutely can. And I know we talked about this during our VIP day, Carol, but
Mhm.
there's research that shows that the way men and women look at job descriptions are very different. And I think this is so fascinating. So apparently, men look at a job description and if they check like 50% of it, they're like, oh, yeah, I'm totally qualified. I'm going to apply for this job. Whereas typically, and we're making gross generalizations here, but typically a woman will read the same job description and feel like she has to check at least 90% or more of the boxes in order to even apply.
Mhm.
And I think that translates to something like speaking. Part of this issue and part of why I'm passionate of closing this gap is one, I do believe that there's a correlation between the gender pay gap and the gender speaking gap, because we do know that higher paying positions typically involve some sort of speaking and presenting. So there's got to be a correlation there. But also, we tend to gravitate towards what we can see. And if we're looking for more role models, we need more women to model what it looks like to raise their hand and say, I can speak. I'll speak on
Mhm.
this topic. I'm owning my expertise. I'm going to position myself as a speaker, as a presenter. I'll volunteer to speak at this event or whatever the case might be. And the more of us that do that, the more women are seen, the more other women, especially the younger generation, are going to say, oh gosh, I could do that too. So I think it's something that in motion has the potential to really have a vast effect and kind of far reaching, kind of that ripple effect, if you will, that can really branch out and change a lot of people's lives for the better.
Oh, yes. I love that, Kristen. You know that. I'm just like, yes, preach it. Say it more. And Diane saying
Oh,
amen.
I have a preach paddle right here. There you
Oh,
go.
there you go. I'm so gonna make those paddles. I need those. All right. So, Kristen, you mentioned our VIP day together, and obviously,
Mhm.
you've been a speaker for a long time, and you have a very clear idea
Mhm.
of your message. I always tell women who book consult calls with us, and we chat with that. We know you are fully competent and capable of creating your own
Mhm.
presentations and making them outstanding. Like we know that, but we also know the value of working with someone else, right? To bounce ideas
Mhm.
off of, to like pull on the threads of what makes a really interesting idea for the audience. So, Kristen, why did you decide to book a VIP day with me? And what was the process like for you?
Oh gosh, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. So as you mentioned, I first got introduced to you. I think I had stalked you a little bit prior to the Brave, Bold, and Beyond Summit last fall. And I can't remember. I think I was just typing in, women and speaking, and I don't remember what the search was, but it led me to you. And as I followed you and followed what you were about, I was like, wow, this woman is passionate about the same things I'm passionate about. She's championing other women's voices and helping them get their message out there. That's what I'm passionate about. So I felt like there was a lot of synergy. And then attending the summit, I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is all of what I'm about. And I had looked into some of your other programs and different reasons, health wise, whatnot. The timing just wasn't right for me. But when you offered that VIP day, a couple things stood out to me. Number one, I knew that I had a new keynote that was matriculating and had been for several months, but there were some key pieces and I just wasn't sure how to tie it all together. Now, as you mentioned, I've been writing talks for 20 years. I've been hired to help other people write talks, and I'm a student at heart, and I know the value of working with someone else because I think sometimes we're so close to our own stuff,
Yes.
it's hard for us to see it, right?
Mhm.
And I really was like, okay, well, if I'm going to work with anyone, Carol is someone who is passionate about the same things I'm passionate about. Success leaves clues, and you've had success in the exact arenas where I'm trying to grow my own speaking business. And so I was like, well, there's no one better. This feels like a match made in heaven. And what was so cool is I felt like it was one of the most efficient and productive times that I've ever had. I mean, quite honestly. And I remember our first meeting was 3 hours and we took a break, of course,
Yes.
but we got so much done and you allowed me the space. I mean, you asked such great questions and just allowed me to share. And at the end, when I could see how you had taken everything that had been up here for months that I had been kind of juggling around and just wondering, okay, how is this going to fit and how do I tie this in? And you did it and you wove it together so beautifully. I mean, it was a co-creative process, right? But at the end, when you were kind of reading it back to me, what we had created, I was full of emotion. I mean, I welled up with tears because it was like, there it is. That's what I've been trying to come up with for the past couple of months, and just had not felt stuck, but just didn't see how it was all going to come together. And through our work together that day alone, it came together more beautifully than I could have imagined. So I'm so grateful for that time. It was such a great investment.
Oh, Kristen, I love to hear that. And, it is a magical process. I'm still
Mhm.
amazed at the end of every 3-hour VIP day that it all comes together. Like I know it
Mhm.
will, but I'm still like
Mhm.
amazed that it does. And it's, to you and to our clients credit too, because you come with these amazing ideas, like with to us, and you're so open and willing to answer all of our questions that Diana and I asked during the VIP days,
It's a
which I know.
necessary part of that process,
Right, and I
right?
know sometimes people are like, "I'm just, like, babbling and rambling." I'm like, "No, no, 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 it all makes sense."
Mhm. You're
So
like,
it makes
keep it coming, this is
Yes,
good, right?"
exactly. So,
Yeah.
Kristen, what's next for you?
Oh gosh. So I've had some exciting opportunities as of late. I unfortunately the position that I held as a full-time presenter was eliminated during COVID. And so when I lost my job in July of 2020, I kind of found myself at a crossroads. Do I go and look for another traditional job at this stage when the world is the way that it is and, all of that? Or is it time to really focus my passion and start, doing what I can to to help other women present their messages? And that's kind of how I found you and, these keynotes that have opened up for me and these doors and speaking and MC gigs. So I'm super passionate about that, but I'm also excited that there might be another opportunity for me to go back into the corporate space as a full-time presenter. And so I'm exploring that as well because I'm passionate about women's voices being represented. And so what I think is so cool is after kind of a step away from that, now the opportunity to kind of go back, but also continue doing what I can on my own to help close this gender speaking gap, part of me doing that might be very well stepping into this role and being a voice in that space. So I'm excited. We'll see what happens, but I'm just excited to continue building my own speaking business as well and emceeing events. And I'm working on my brand new website, so I can't wait for that to come out. But just any way that I can to help further this work that I'm really passionate about.
Oh, I love that, Kristin. And for those of you who are watching, make sure to connect with Kristin here on LinkedIn. She is in the event, like listed as a speaker. So you can probably click there to go to her profile or put her name in, and make sure to connect with Kristin there. And then, Kristin, what is your website address?
So it will be bookkristiноakley.com. So Kristin with a K and then 2 I's. That's always important.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Good to know. Kristin, thank you so much for coming on Backstage with Speaking Your Brand. I have so enjoyed getting to know you, and I am so grateful that you are out there standing on stages and inspiring more women to do the same. For those of you who are watching, our next Backstage with Speaking Your Brand will be 2 weeks from today. So Monday, December 6th, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Diane Diaz and I will be talking about our year in review. So, backstage, this is where we take you backstage behind the scenes of what we do here. And so we're going to talk about what worked this year in the business, what didn't work, and what's coming in 2022. So I can't wait for that. Be sure to look out for a post. And if you want to get on our email list, which is the best way to be notified of our LinkedIn live shows, podcast episodes, and so on, just go to speakingyourbrand.com/guide. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/guide. That will also get you our thought leader workbook at the same time. So you can grab that there. Kristin, thank you again. It was such a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me, Carol. And thank you for everything that you're doing to help close the gender speaking gap and just to empower more women. It's just a beautiful thing.